The wall had fallen, and with it, a world was reborn. But to understand the power of that night, we must return to the decades before. When the Berlin Wall rose in 1961, it was more than a structure of concrete and steel. It was a scar carved through the heart of a nation, a wound that split families, friendships, and futures. Overnight, neighbors became foreigners, lovers were torn apart, and children grew up gazing across a no-man's land of barbed wire, minefields, and watchtowers. East Berlin became a prison, while the West glimmered with freedoms only visible from a distance. Anna had grown up in this cage. She knew only the gray monotony of East German life. Ration cards, propaganda posters, the ever-present eyes of the Stasi. Her mother whispered stories of the West, of cousins she had never met, of streets filled with color and music. For Anna, the wall was not just stone, it was the line that had stolen her childhood. Lukas, just 2 years older, was a student with questions that textbooks in the East never dared answer. At night, he tuned his secret radio, listening to voices from beyond the Iron Curtain. They spoke of freedom, of change spreading like cracks through the Soviet Empire. He knew he was gambling with his future. One knock on the door from the Stasi could end it all. But he could not stop listening. Each forbidden broadcast fed his hope. By the late 1980s, winds of change swept across Eastern Europe. Poland embraced free elections. Hungary opened its borders. The once iron grip of Moscow began to tremble. In East Germany, the whispers grew louder. People marched, candles in hand, chanting, "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people." Anna and Lukas joined those marches. For the first time, Anna felt her fear shrink before the strength of the crowd. Standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers, she lifted her candle high and shouted, "For our children, for our freedom." Lukas looked at her then, not as a stranger in the shadows, but as someone carrying the same fire. But change never comes without risk. Riot police filled the streets. Armored vehicles rolled into Leipzig. Soldiers waited with loaded rifles. And yet, they did not fire. The people were too many, their voices too strong. Anna never forgot the sight of hardened officers lowering their shields, as if even they knew history had turned. And then came November 9th, 1989. A single confused announcement broadcast live on television altered the fate of millions. An official stammered through his notes, declaring new travel rules were effective immediately. It was not what the government had intended, but the words could not be unsaid. Within hours, the streets of East Berlin thundered with footsteps. Families carrying luggage, young people with nothing but coats, grandparents clutching hands, they all surged toward the checkpoints. Anna stood frozen at first, heart pounding. Could it really be true? Lukas grabbed her hand. "We must go, now." The crowd swept them forward. At the barrier, soldiers stood stiff, rifles in hand, but their faces betrayed exhaustion, hesitation. Shouts grew louder, "Open the gates! Freedom! Freedom!" And finally, one guard raised his hand, voice breaking, "Let them through." What followed was chaos and joy entwined. People poured through the checkpoints, rushing toward the west. Others climbed atop the wall itself, laughing, crying, waving flags. Lukas boosted Anna upward, his glasses fogged with the cold night air. When she reached the top, she turned, tears streaming down. She cried, "It's happening!" All around them, hammers struck concrete. Chunks of the wall rained down, passed from hand to hand as trophies of freedom. Strangers embraced, families reunited after decades of separation. Music blared, fireworks cracked above the city. Anna felt the ground of history shifting beneath her feet. From the top of the wall, she gazed out at the lights of West Berlin, bright, colorful, alive. "So bright, like another world," she whispered. Below, a mother collapsed into the arms of her grown son, tears streaming down her face. "My boy, after so many years!" She clung to him as though she would never let go again. Lukas drew Anna close, his voice soft in her ear. "The future is ours." And Anna, clutching the silver locket at her throat, whispered through her tears, "No wall can stop hope." The Berlin Wall did not fall in silence. It fell with the roar of a people who refused to be caged any longer. It fell with the swing of hammers and the cries of freedom echoing into the night. And when it crumbled, the world changed, not just for Germany, but for everyone who had lived under the shadow of the Cold War. For Anna, it meant family she could finally embrace. For Lukas, it meant ideas could flow freely at last. For millions, it meant the beginning of a future where walls of fear gave way to bridges of unity. Berlin, once a city split in two, became a symbol of hope. A reminder that no matter how high, no matter how guarded, no wall can stand forever against the will of the people. And so, on that cold November night in 1989, the world witnessed not just the fall of a wall, but the triumph of the human spirit.
Berlin, 1989. A city divided by concrete and fear. The Berlin Wall cut through streets, through homes, through hearts, a scar of the Cold War. When it rose in 1961, Walter Ulbricht, East Germany's leader, had promised no one intends to build a wall. Yet overnight, barbed wire became concrete, and freedom was stolen. Families were separated in a single night. Lovers said goodbye through fences. Children grew up with grandparents just a few blocks away, but sealed off as if across an ocean. For Anna, born after the wall, the barrier was all she had ever known. She grew up in East Berlin under the watchful eyes of the Stasi, the secret police who turned neighbors into informants and whispers into danger. Every phone call could be listened to. Every letter opened. Posters on the streets shouted slogans of socialism, but the gray silence of the city told another story. Her mother spoke sometimes of the West, of cousins in Hamburg, of streets filled with music and neon lights. But to Anna, those were fairy tales. The wall was too high, the watchtowers too many. She pressed her hand to the cold concrete and thought, on the other side is my family. I've never even met them. Meanwhile, Lukas, 2 years older, carried the hunger of a student who longed for truth. At night, he bent over a forbidden radio, its static hissing like a secret. Western voices cut through the noise. News of reforms in Poland, protests in Hungary, Soviet weakness under Mikhail Gorbachev. His heart raced as he whispered, "If they can do it, maybe we can too." He knew the risk. "Turn that off," a friend warned. "The Stasi could be listening." But Lukas's voice was firm. No wall lasts forever. The cracks were spreading. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy had stood in West Berlin and declared, "Ich bin ein Berliner." In 1987, Ronald Reagan stood at the Brandenburg Gate, pointing to the wall and thundering, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." For years, those words were dismissed as impossible. But by the late 1980s, the impossible was already happening. Across Eastern Europe, people marched for freedom. In Leipzig, candles filled the streets. "Wir sind das Volk. We are the people." The chants rose, louder and louder. Anna lifted her own candle, her blue eyes fierce with hope. "For our children, for our freedom," Lukas shouted beside her. The riot police stood ready, shields raised, rifles loaded. One officer muttered, "There are too many." And for the first time, the people realized the state was afraid of them. Then came November 9th, 1989. On East German television, an official stumbled over his words, declaring new travel rules. Permanent relocations may be applied for without conditions, effective immediately.